This is Between Realms and Reason, bridging the inner and outer cosmos, one conversation at a time. Here's your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Most spiritual journeys come down to one simple challenge. How do we live in the real world without losing touch with what we know inside ourselves? A Mystic in Nature by Molly Harvey is written from that exact place. Molly has spent over 40 years moving between inner exploration and outer leadership. Long before this book, she was a respected figure in leadership development, founding outstanding women leaders, becoming the first female president of the Professional Speakers Association in England, and advising work that links consciousness with real-world change. Written in two voices, one grounded in nature, the other in inner reflection, this book doesn't tell people what to believe. It asks better questions about how we live, how we listen, and what we choose to stand for. Molly Harvey joins me now to talk about how this book came into being, why it needed two voices, and how to live with both clarity and depth in an uncertain world. Molly Harvey, welcome.
Welcome and good morning, and thank you for having me, Cindy. Thank you.
Always good to have you with us, Molly. So, you're widely known as a leadership authority. You've spoken to hundreds of organisations worldwide. You've written several non-fiction books on change and responsibility, and you've spent decades working in very visible, practical leadership spaces. A Mystic in Nature feels markedly different from that body of work. So what shifted for you personally or professionally that made this the book that you needed to write now?
Few things, really. The first thing is, I think I waited all my life to be 60.
Well, I've never heard that one before.
I think I waited all my life to be 60. And I say that in a very heartfelt way. Because if I'm to be totally honest, and now that I am 60, I can be, I've lived in a threshold all my life. And that was a lot because of my upbringing. And I had a grandmother who was very fey. So I had to learn to live the opposite way, actually. My eyes were born on the inside. And now today, everybody's saying, oh, live from the inside out, not the outside in. And yet that was the only way I ever knew. And I had to do the opposite. I had to learn from 14, 15 to start putting my eyes on the outside is what I used to say. And now it's so trendy, that everybody's saying, oh, live from the inside out, lead from the inside out. And that really has been my life's work, Sandy. I mean, the funny thing, I was reflecting this morning in private prayer time. It's always been, it's the essence of who I am, really. It's what I call the inner cathedral. I go inside. And I was thinking this morning, I was thinking back to being 13 years old. And I remember at 13, I asked Mr. Landers, the class teacher, I said to him, we had this talk all about what do you want to be, in Ireland. Then you joined the bank or you became a nun, or you, banking, nun, being a nurse, being a doctor, something like that. And I remember putting my hand up in class and I said to Mr. Landers, I said, could I get a job with the soul? I'd like could I get a job where I do something with the soul? And I remember Mr. Landers thinking, I don't know where we got that one from. I don't know where she comes from sometimes. And even at 13, I was, it was always the inner call for me. In fact, I suppose really in Ireland in the early years, they wouldn't have been surprised if I had become a nun. But no, I wasn't called to be a nun. I was called to go out and to go into corporate. And I was called to work in the corporate boardrooms across the world, really. And I remember in 2006, Sandy, I didn't know if I should take it as an insult or if he was saying something positive to me. But I had done a masterclass with 14 CEOs. And one of the guys wrote, afterwards when they were doing the feedback, and he said, well, she arrived in the room and she was like Mother Teresa. And we were thinking she's the Irish Mother Teresa. And then within 10 minutes, she turned into Alan Sugar, and she killed us all. And I think I've always had that inside in me. I call it living on a threshold. I always say to people, grace is not all soft. Grace can be fierce. And it was something I never learned. It was an inner knowing that I had. Like with the book, I've always asked those awkward, hard questions.
That's good. Well, the book doesn't speak in a single authoritative voice. It moves between the mystic and the man of nature. Why wasn't one voice enough?
Well, I can explain that. Go back. 2011, I was introduced to a lady who was probably mystic herself, but she also had a great grip. You'd go to her, she was a psychic. And she said to me in 2011, she said, you write many books in your life, she said, but you're here to write a book that will be here 500 years from now. And she said, it'll be one of those books when you get to that age where you'll dare to come out and write, basically in the spiritual genre. And I just thought, oh yeah, that's grand. So, you know what I mean? So what? But actually, again, coming back to now to 60, you see, sometimes you have to go through really tough lessons in life. And I've had a lot of grief and a lot of sadness and a lot of falling away in my life since 2014. And in 2021, my life partner passed away. And we'd 6 months. Now, I thought I was done. I thought, that's it. I'm done. I've been blessed in my life to have great partners. And then I was called to open my heart to love again. But in opening my heart to love again, the man that entered my life is a man of nature. So we'd be having these dialogues, Sandie, and mine would always be about the soul or the threshold or the mystery or the unseen, because I see things, I see things, I feel them. I actually think that world is more real sometimes than our current world now. So it's nothing, to me. And then I began to think, we began to have this dialogue. And then I'll be totally honest with you, 5 o'clock in the morning, any books that I've ever wrote, the only time I can write is the early morning. And I started dialoguing in the early morning. And then I'd show it to him and he'd say, let me go away. And he'd write. So as you know, it's 2 voices, 1 heart. And he'd write, but he'd write from the seasons, from nature, from the land. And I'd be writing from the ethereal, the mystic, the stories of when I was smaller. I'd be writing from all that. And that's how the mystic in nature came about. And suddenly we sat down and we started laughing and we said, my goodness, there's a book here. There's 2 voices, but actually we're 1 heart. And then this year, we spiritually got married in June. So it's a nice story. And we had Joy T. Ma come to do our blessing and some of the grandmothers. We also had a Swedish grandmother, great-grandmother came over. So I feel very blessed in my life that actually love found me again. I dared to open my heart again. And that's really not only dare to open my heart, maybe when I look at the book now, I realize that actually I dared to open the soul side that was always waiting to be 60. Yeah. I keep saying 60. And that's it. That's how it came about.
So when someone opens this book, especially people who know you through your leadership work, what do you hope that they feel before they begin to understand anything?
Right. That's a great question, because they're used to seeing the past leadership books, like Outstanding Leadership, that I wrote, and they're very succinct and very matter of fact. And this is an inner journey. So Mystic in Nature is really the inside. It really is the inside out. And it's also thinking about those questions that you dare not ask yourself in private, and I'll give you an example here. I just opened the book randomly, and that's interesting. I just opened the book, The Sacred Shift of Action. There comes a point in every life where the soul begins to stir, not out of restlessness, but out of remembrance. Well, you see, I think that just... When you stop standing in your own way, the universe no longer needs to wait either. And I think when you stop standing in your own way. And that's what I would say to leaders. How are you getting in your own way today? Where are you holding back in your life that maybe you shouldn't be right now? Because right now, more than ever before, we're called to own our power, own our presence, more than ever before, and own our medicine. And the medicine is the medicine each of us carries, in whatever leadership role you're called to be in the world. As I said, from 1990, until even still today, I was in the boardrooms. I was in the UN. I was called to be in those echelons. However, now I'm called to be in different realms. It's a yes and. I've gone into many boardrooms, to be honest with you. And I come away and I feel a deep sadness. Because I look at the eyes into some of the people around the boardroom table, and they're trying to be something they're not, or living to something they're not. And, the world of tomorrow is not about profits. It's not just about profits, it's about presence. And you see, the thing that concerns me today is people think they can find presence in a book or in GP chat. No, you can't find presence in a book, and you can't find presence in a GP chat. Because if you look deeper, there'll be something missing. There'll be an emptiness. Now, you know yourself when you've met leaders who have real kudos, who have heart, who have a hunger, a deep hunger, but that hunger comes from inside. That's what makes us fully human, fully alive.
Alongside A Mystic in Nature, you also created What Matters Today, which is a year-long daily journal that slows people down and brings attention back to what actually matters. So, that actually feels like the lived practical side of this same shift.
You are spot on. So I was actually in the middle of writing this when this came along. So that's why both have come out this year. It's happening, and then this was happening. And What Matters Today came out of Paul dying. Came out of the love of this lifetime that came in for 7.5 years. And I remember sitting down after his funeral and thinking, well, what really matters? And very few things really matter. And I thought, family matters, health matters. To me, simplicity matters. And then I began to look over my life, and it comes back to the questioning again. One of the things in my life that I seem to always have, and even as a little girl, my grandmother used to always say, if you ask one more question. And I just thought, I wonder if I could give to the world or share to the world some of the questions that have taken me inside over the years. And I'll just open again. We'll just see. I'll just open randomly. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves. What irritates you about others? Does it matter today? And I wanted to make the journal. I was actually going to call it, and I didn't have the courage. I was going to call it What Matters Today for Busy Fools. And I thought, what can I do? What can I create a journal that I'll say to somebody, just give me 60 seconds in your day. 60 seconds. Start with 60 seconds. And it'll have a wisdom quote. It'll have a question, and then it'll ask you what matters today. And that was why I brought it together. I wanted to be something that everybody could, that they could have with it. It becomes their companion. It becomes their spiritual companion. Now, I use the word spiritual. Somebody else, maybe Graham would use nature. In fact, we just decided this morning, I just said, we'll both sit down in January. I'm going to gift you a copy. And at the end of each month, we'll have a coffee and then we go over what you filled in that month and what I filled in. I'm going to do my own book because people think it's strange, but when I write, I have to read my own book. I learned from my own book. I learned from this. I learned from the mystic in nature.
Mm. So you open What Matters with a chapter called What's It All About, Alfie? Borrowing that moment from the iconic Michael Caine movie. Why did that feel like the right place to begin?
Because I think even in my own life, we can get so caught up so easily in what doesn't matter. The next speaking gig, the next this, the next that, or somebody can trigger you. And then in the greater scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Because the present moment, even that we're in right now, is already passing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring a little light as well on what matters today. Because it has light, depth, and many, many other things.
It's interesting how we meet that revelation, that heart-stopping moment several times in our life, usually when something terrible happens. And we quickly go on past it.
Totally. And it's, it happened to me consistently from 2014. I use the words, I say my soul came knocking. 2014, a 25-year marriage came to an end. Well, the grief and the peeling back that came from that. But I knew I had to leave the marriage. Why? Because that inner knowing, something larger than me, that invisible presence that I always say walked with me, that I've always turned to. In Ireland, we say, when you hit hard times, you don't go out in the street and talk about it. You keep your door closed and you go inwards. But too many people today go out in the street and speak about it. No. You turn inside. Or maybe that's what I've always done. I get very reflective and I turn inside.
Yeah, I really understand that. And people think that you're withdrawing, but it's a necessary withdrawal.
Oh, Sandie, I have friends that ring me up and they say, Molly, come out of the cave. They say, you're in the cave, come out of the cave. And then in 2018, I again, the soul, but it came knocking really hard in 2018 to say, are you listening? So I lost 6 people and a cat and a bobble hat in a year. and 3 of them were family. And it was really funny. I remember my daughter ringing me up from Australia and she says, "Mother, I'm really worried about you." She said, "You've cried more about the cat." Because we numb ourselves. We can be so good at numbing ourselves and then moving on and getting caught up on a hamster wheel again. This invisible hamster wheel that doesn't exist.
Mm. Do you regret how much time you spent, doing the work that you were doing? Because
No.
that must at times have been like a hamster wheel.
No.
You don't?
No. And I don't, because it's what I was born to do. No, I loved it. I loved it for the seasons that it was. I loved it. However, now I'm kind of slowly but surely coming into the new season. And I think also allowing a side of me. It was really interesting, when I go into boardrooms, or I think the biggest audience I ever spoke to was 25,000. And people who could read energy would know. It happened to me in Uzbekistan. I know that the president of a university, we had interpreters, of course, because he could speak Uzbek and Russian. But I know he saw that other side in me, because he kept putting his hand in his hat, and he'd hold out his hand and he kept looking for my eyes. And I remember asking the interpreter when we left the university, because I had to address, I think it went over 5 regions or something across Uzbekistan. And I remember I said to the interpreter, I said, he used to put his hand to his hat. I said, "I just noticed that." And she said, "Yes," she said, "we haven't seen that before." She said that he was trying to say, "I hold you in my hat." So he saw the energy that I carried. And my hope for leadership of the future is that now that we're reawakening on a whole other level, that we will see beyond the falseness into the true energy that another soul carries.
Yes, wouldn't that be nice?
And now more than ever before, it's reunification. It's unity. If we don't unify as a human race, we're in deep trouble.
Absolutely. I mean, early in the book, you write about awakening as a quiet remembering rather than a dramatic event.
Yes.
Was there a moment in your own life that you remember, that remembering became impossible to ignore?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. From 6 years old, I started to remember. And then when my father passed over I was going between 13 and 14, I think 13, 14, and he passed over. I knew things before I should know them. Does that make sense? I just knew. I would say things. I knew things. And then I realized at 14, when one of the ladies in the village said, "You need to put away what you have. People used to be burnt at the stake," she said, "for what you have," she said. And I remember going, I was only a child, really. I was 14, but she said, "You know too much. You know too much, put it away." And you see, I did put it away, but that was my passage of time. I did kind of wrap it away. But then I had, I'll tell you, one of the clearest remembrances I had was I was working with, so I had 2 sides of my life. I had very much the business side, and then working with the Indigenous across the world. I've had the great privilege in my life. And I remember I was on a sacred mission in upstate New York, and the Kogai had come into New York and up to state, because they were opening portals, basically, in upstate New York. And we went into ceremony for 3 days and 3 nights. So that was with many, many Indigenous elders. Native American, Amazonian, Kogai, Lakota. So I remember I was the only white Irish person who was there, and it was a great privilege that they saw something in me that I could hold this and walk this way. So I can't remember, it was the second or the third day, we went down to a huge waterfall where they were working on the portals, opening the portals. And I knew, but I didn't have the words. And I will never forget, I just for a moment, it was almost like the veils fell from my eyes. And I had a whole remembrance of my life as an Essene. And I looked around me, and everybody in the company I was in were previous Essenes. And I even knew their names. And then it went on after that, because when I came, I remember for a few days after, I started to have dreams. And in my dreams, because sometimes our remembering will come true in dreams in different ways. And then I was told in a dream that my father had been my brother as an Essene. And it made so much sense to me, because my father was my hero all my life and has been. And for the first 13 years of my life, of my life in this lifetime, he didn't know, but he carried something. He carried I call it a holiness. He carried something. He carried a light.
How did that change things for you, that remembering?
Changed everything. Brought me deeper home to who I truly am. Brought me deeper home to who I truly am. And that remembrance, it explained a lot to me. It explained to me why, as a child, I had this thing about washing my hands. And about another thing that I had, which is a very Essene trait, I believe, was before I go to bed at night, I'm still the same. Everything has to just be in order, just in case I leave. And I've all my life, I'm not today, but all my life I've had a fascination with white, with wearing white. So, of course, with going into ceremony with the elders, it's natural for me to just be drawn to wearing white or cream.
In your section on the weight of knowing and gravity of doubt, you explore doubt as a companion rather than as an obstacle. How do you personally discern between soul-led caution and the ego's fear response?
Soul-led caution and the ego. Yeah, okay. You see, the ego is a more of a pounding voice to me. The soul is quieter. The soul comes in whispers. And the ego is the great I am. And I need to portray who I am and what I've done in my life and what I've been. And that's the ego to me. Whereas the soul is much more subtle, quieter. Soul doesn't have to announce itself. It just is.
Do you never doubt the soul?
Never.
Never,
ever, ever. It's that silent voice that carries me through my life. Never doubt the voice. Never doubt the voice of the soul. I never have. However, the only reason I think I have got used to really discerning between both is because I go into silence. Because actually in silence, that's where the answers are. And today they say, go outside, pick the next book, pick this, go that, go here, go there. No. But, so many today can't even handle silence.
That's true. So would you say that silence is what helps you come back into flow?
Silence is flow.
Silence is flow.
Silence is flow. Silence is the river. Silence is flow. And silence is when the boulders, because we all meet the boulders in our life, and I count the doubt as a big boulder, okay? And the only way I'm ever able to handle those boulders is silence. And if I'm silent long enough, the answers will come. And I'll tell you how I know when the right answer has come. And if I had one of my best friends, Christiane Pedras, beautiful German native, she was here now, she'd say, her feet just won't move. She said, nothing will move her. And we've worked all around the world together, you know, and sometimes she'd say, because I'm, in Chinese terms, I'm a dragon, right? In Chinese astrology, I'm the dragon. And she said, dragon's feet just won't move. And everybody else might be moving in that direction. But if my feet won't move, I have to listen to that. And it's also like somebody recently asked me to do something. I trust them. I like them. I have so much respect for them. I couldn't do it. I knew I had to say no. And that client was quite devastated and kept saying, but why? I said, look, I don't know right now, but I have to say no right now. And I said, it'll be made known. And it was. I said, I'm not the person. It's not me. It's not personal. I have to say no. And by the way, just to tell you again, the ego, oh my goodness, the ego wanted to say yes. And I'll tell you why, because it would have got me out there in the limelight in such a big way. But it said no.
Yes, I mean, that's a real telling point, isn't it? You know, those moments where we really have to reflect on what we're going to miss if we say no.
Absolutely. And there's 3 questions I ask myself, and I'd ask anybody. When those boulders come up in my life, I stop, I find a place to be quiet. And if I light a candle. I always have the candle. So if I can have a candle, and then I ask 3 questions. What does the head say? Which is the ego. Oh, I'll get all this great. Oh my goodness me. What's the head saying? What's the heart say? And then, but what does the soul say?
Yeah.
And I guarantee you there'll be 3 different answers.
Yeah. I understand that. Yeah. So the naturalist voice in the book keeps pointing to how nature moves without needing explanations first. What do you think we lose when we insist on certainty before we're willing to take a step?
Oh, that's because we try to control our life. And it brings me back to the Irish priest, Father Jimmy O'Connell, who passed away at 53. I had 3 great teachers in my life. He was the 2nd great teacher that I went on and worked with from 18 to 25 years old in the west of Ireland. I remember him ringing me one Christmas. And he said, and he rang me and he said, the cancer's come back. And he said, I'm so cross. And I thought, God, this Jimmy never talks like this, you know. And he said, I'm so cross. And I said, why are you cross, Jimmy? Because he said, I've done everything right. I have the right diet. I run every day. He said, I've done everything right. The cancer's come back. And he said, you know what's really wrong, Molly? I said, what? He said, I'm trying to control. And we think we can control. And he said, really, at the end of the day, we can control nothing.
Yeah.
We think we can, and we like to think we can, but actually we can't control anything. I think that's the path we have to walk. So here's the question, do you use your willpower? Or do you actually lean in and surrender? And if you lean in and surrender, I think you'll have a softer time.
That's an easier one for some than others, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. Because the willpower is so strong. I mean, going back to Paul when he was given 6 months, he was the fittest man you could ever think. We'd always go and have health checks. He'd come back and he'd be the one that had, I don't know, he was 10 years younger than what he was and everything in his body type. I was always 10 years older. I was always 10, 15 years older. And I'd be going, damn. So really, at the end of the day, in that journey home to whatever home is for us, I say to people, lean into that willpower. Lean into that cushion that you do, because really, you're only doing it to yourself at the end of the day.
You write about choice as something that shapes us over time, not just in big moments. Looking back, was there a choice that quietly but fundamentally changed the direction of your life?
I think I've had many choice points along my life, to be honest. Because one thing I want to say here is people think if they make a choice, that's it. No. Remember, every 9 seconds, you can choose to make a new choice. So you can make a choice and you can change it. So I just want to say that every 9 seconds, you can make a new choice. So yes, I have had what I call many choice points in my life, and that's the crossroads. I can say leaving my marriage. By the way, we're great friends still today. But I know I wouldn't be sitting speaking to you this morning. Our marriage had come to a natural ending. That was a huge choice point. Because something bigger than me inside me was saying I had to grow. I don't know and experience all that I had to experience over the last few years. I had to leave that comfort zone. So that I would say that was 11 years ago. That was the biggest choice point that's taken me today, because then everything that rolled and changed today all came as a result. And by the way, I went back for 6 months. I'm back for 6 months. And we do laugh about it today, because I remember we went back for 6 months and my husband's gone on to get married. Now he's married a lovely woman. And again, I had a knowing that for that season in my life that I was going to, and that he was going to go in. It's not all about me. I knew that he would grow more. He needed somebody else to grow with. That wasn't me. And it's very hard, because I knew there was such a love there, and there still is today. But I knew that I would stunt his growth. And that all happened in choice point moments, Sandie.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, these moments that come that we know we have to do something, even though, there's all of the logic says there's, why are you doing that? Would you call that, do you think that knowing comes from your soul? Do you think it comes from some kind of external guidance?
Yes, I do. I feel it comes from something bigger than myself. Yeah, some people call it God. Some people call it, Graham would call it the seasons and nature. Call it whatever you want. But I think there's a divine force. I call it that invisible presence that has guided me all my life, has been my best friend since I was a little girl. And it's always that invisible presence. And it comes, and I've had to make really, really hard. I can remember another choice point. I was president of Professional Speakers Association, the first woman president ever in the UK. And of course, that was a great year for, you'd be accolades and you go here and you go there. It's great for the ego again, great for the ego. And you go here, go there and everywhere. And guess what? That year I never went to the States. That year I never went. And the ego was crying out, going, are you crazy? Are you mad? this is it. This is it. And I just couldn't go. And people said to me afterwards, why didn't you? And I said, well, it's 1 year in my life of however many years I live.
Mm.
I said, and I remember saying to somebody, do you want fame or do you want significance? And I said, significance is more important in my life, not fame. Fame is a moment, but significance.
Mm.
What matters today? What can I significantly do today in the time that I have today that can make a difference? Now, that might be for me now, something bigger than us this year caught me back to live in Ireland after 37 years. That's a whole book at how that happened, because that was totally led Sandie. I was minding my own business, sitting one morning at the kitchen table, minding my own business back in England. I'd come back from Ireland. I'd go 2 or 3 times a year to see family. And something said to me, again, I call it that voice. Something said to me, ring your sister and get Lord Tyrone's number. And by the way, Lord Tyrone is because I grew up in a country estate until I was 14. My father used to look after the Lord's horses. So I rang my sister and I said, have you Lord Tyrone's number? And she said, no. And then a few minutes later, I said, ask Tony, which was her husband. And the number comes through. I rang. I rang the number. Lord Tyrone picks up the phone. I hadn't spoken to him for about 40 years. It was just like yesterday. And I then knew I wasn't meant to go back and live in Curramore Estate. And then straight away, as I left down the phone, Graham is looking at me, my partner, going, what's happening here? I ring my sister again. Woodhouse Estate. Woodhouse Estate. Have you got the number? No. And then that was the whole beginning of synchronicities or breadcrumbs. I always say, follow the breadcrumbs. And people, you see, will become too impatient today saying, I don't want the breadcrumbs, I want the whole loaf. No. Follow the breadcrumbs. I followed each breadcrumb. And we're living in an extraordinary, and I'm here, I think I have a fair idea why I'm here in this beautiful home in the countryside for a few years. But I'm being guided. And if I said that the house I'm in today, I followed the green door. And the green door was the mystic St. Bridget.
Yeah.
And my partner got really cross, by the way. The boulders were big, Sandie. My partner, one stage, he said, oh, that looks ugly. You always say you live in beauty. You're going to live in beauty. You're going to spend your days in beauty. He said, that doesn't look beautiful. I said, I have to follow the green door. I have to follow the green door. I just know there's something. When he got here, when we came to view it, he absolutely fell in love with the place. But it was shrouded in mystery. It was closed in.
Will you share what you think you're there for, or is that a secret?
I think some of it. I'll share some of it. I know some of it. So some of it, I think, is to work with the energies. So the house is built and there's a fairy list behind at the edge of the house. And then right now in Ireland, there's a real resurgence happening. Across the world, there's a real resurgence. But the people in Ireland are beginning to go back to the wells. And actually, and I didn't know this was just revealed when I came to view the house. So there's a holy well across in the field that's been closed up for years. And also I'm a custodian of Little Woods. And in the spring, the men are going to come with the women and make a pathway down to the well. And then this is where you have to follow the breadcrumbs. So something in me said that I was not to go to the well on my own, that there's a reverence of ancient customs, and that I had to be taken to the well by an elder. And would you believe it? 2 weekends ago, we were in the tiny village here. They were turning on the lights. We were in the pub. The lady that comes to sit with me. Her husband passed in April. She's the owner of all the land and the well. So we're going to the well in the spring. So if we sit and listen, not just listen, but hear, where we're meant to take the next step will be given. And what I would say to everybody is you have to shut out the outside noise of people, and you don't tell anybody. Be really careful about who you tell, because people will tell you not to go there, not to do it. And I had to in the end close down and follow. And now everybody goes, oh my goodness, how did you end up here? And how did you end up? Because at the moment I'm building a sanctuary upstairs. And that sanctuary will be opened on St. Bridget's Eve to a very small group of people who will come. There'll be no big hoo-ha. But the house is a sanctuary. I know that. And I'm meant to work with the energy for the next however long. And then we'll be asked to move on again, I'm sure.
You know, I'm hearing about many people who are finding, receiving the call to go back to the old ways, honour some of the old rituals,
Totally.
listen to nature. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the world will be a better place for doing so.
Totally. And now coming back to this part of Ireland, it's like England used to be 40 years ago. So if I said to you, I've actually turned into my grandmother. I mean, she used to always take me over the ditches and the fields to her friends, because they had no cars in those days. So now, who do I listen to now? So I have the mountains on the left and the sea is on the right. So I go with Graham, but the land speaks. The land is speaking. The land is speaking. So I'm getting my instruction currently from the land. I'm getting my instruction currently from the wind again. For many years, I couldn't listen. I couldn't hear anymore the language of the wind. And now I'm slowly, my ears, I'm able to listen to the language of the wind again.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautiful because it's so simple.
You've read The Mists of Avalon, haven't you?
Pardon?
You've read The Mists of Avalon.
Gosh, I haven't read that since I was about 15. Now I need to go back and read that. Go on, yeah?
Because in there, it becomes very evident that the king, she takes Arthur, and before he can be declared the king, he has to kind of do, certain rituals that bind him to the land, because the land has to declare him king as well. Yeah. And I think that, we pass these things off as fairy tales and mythology, but I think that there is something very, very important in that.
Well, I can share something that is happening as we speak with the listeners. So I was recommended to a healer in Ireland, and I thought he was a psychic, and that's the only reason why I went. Okay. And I bought my sister and I bought her daughter. After one session with this man, he does no social media, anything. Literally, it's because I've witnessed it, I believe it. After one session with him, my sister has no pain in her back after 19 years. So we went back just 2 weeks ago again. We had another session booked. So when he worked with me, and he's very matter of fact, okay? He's quite matter of fact. And when he worked to me, he said, how have you been? And I said, I'm great. I said, I feel great myself. I said, but I said, I still have the pain in this arm. I said, the right arm, I said, I still get this pain, I said, and I think it's the trauma from an accident I had in 2021. And he looked at me, Sandie, and he said, no, that's no trauma in your hands. And I said, so what is it? And he said, well, the fairies dragged you back to Ireland. He said, you walked in here, he said, with the fairies hanging off of your hand. My sister went white her daughter just couldn't speak for an hour because they were the only ones that know that my grandmother was very fey and saw fairies, and I know about the Tuatha Danann, and it's just in my lineage, right? The Tuatha Danann. And my sister said, How did you know? He said, well, he said, I don't even know why I'm saying this to her, he said, but I've seen it twice, he said, and she's walked in again today, he said, and they're hanging off your arm. And he said, they've brought you back, he said, here. And then my sister said, how long have you that pain in your arm? And I said, since 2018. So I think it's the trauma of, just letting go of trauma. And my sister said, well, she said, I never shared something that I'm going to share here today. And I said, what's that? She said, when Mammy was being buried, I said to Mammy, as her body was lowered into the grave, I'll bring Molly back to Ireland somehow. And he looked at Anna and he said, well, they've been pulling her back, he said, since 2018.
Wow. Yeah. So you've spent years teaching leadership and responsibility.
Yes.
What is something that you had to unlearn before this book could be written?
Oh, letting go, Sandie. Oh, unlearn everything. Everything. And continue to be peeled back again and again and again. Everything. And it's the year of the snake. And the snake has just... I've had to unlearn 59 years to even dare to share what I've shared, especially the last story. Everything. It's taken everything.
Wow. You're making such an enormous transition. And when that happens in our lives, it's our relationships that often feel it first. What have you learned about staying connected, at times like this without shrinking or over-explaining? When your inner world is shifting, it is so hard to articulate or to answer people's questions, the whys, to say that I'm just following this call. I mean, what tips can you share with someone who's facing a similar situation and they don't know how to share it, how to explain it?
I think you have to trust yourself when no one else trusts you. I think you have to believe in those quiet moments when no one else believes in you. And you have to keep visualizing it and keep seeing what's in front of you. And every day, just get up. And as my feet touch the floor, I say, thank you. And also, I will say, you might have a big falling away from who used to be around you. And there's no judgment. It just means that they've gone this far with you on the journey. And sometimes it's not people too far outside you. It can be the people closest to you will tell you to cop on or to get a grip or do like I had somebody very well known ring me and said, Molly, people are calling you the soul woman. I'd stop that. It'll affect your leadership and your bookings. Yeah. Do you think it's affecting your profile and your bookings?
What did you say?
I said, and I'll keep on walking. And I have. Because, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't hip to talk about what I was talking about. I don't know where, but in corporate world, I was able to, the language just came to me. It was a language that just came. And the people who were to get it were to get it. And then the other people would get what they needed to get. But now it's like I've opened the door to a side of me that I only used to share with a few people. And now it's like, well, I'm out there. This is what I am, especially a mystic in nature.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really, it's like the door is opened and people are going, wow.
So after everything you've explored in this book, what feels the simplest and the truest to you now?
Simplest and the truest. Okay, well, I'll open it and let it tell us. I don't know. The echo of love past. The past, if left untended, does not simply fade. It lingers like a whispered name in the soul's corridors, shaping how we reach for love and how we let it in. How funny. I was talking to you about letting love in again. You see, when you begin to love yourself with the depth and devotion you once reserved for others, you create the space for sacred relationships. Those that do not need to fix or save, but simply honor. So maybe the message the book is saying, when you begin to love yourself with the depth and the devotion you once reserved for others, come home to your own soul. I always say everybody else is taken.
Yes, that's right.
And
Absolutely.
when, it's like somebody, I heard somebody recently who I know, and she was trying to guide somebody. She said, eat your own ice cream or find your own ice cream. You don't have to copy somebody else's.
Yeah.
All right, it's all right to say I'll have a lick of someone else's ice cream, but find your roots. Go back. Freya is rooted. Freya. Find what roots you. Because I can tell you, I believe the market next year is going to be bombarded with hundreds of thousands more books, AI generated and assisted and whatever. Yeah, I don't know. You'd know much more about that than I would, Sandie. But somebody said it to me the other day, and they said hundreds of thousands. But I guarantee you'll pick up many and there'll be something missing. And you don't know what that one thing is missing. And that one thing will be soul.
Exactly. That's exactly what I tell people who tell me they're using AI to write their book. Yeah, technically, and I've seen some, technically brilliant, not an ounce of energy or soul in them. And that's going to make the difference.
It's too perfect. When it's too perfect.
Yeah.
But the soul, you see, the soul and the heart. The soul and the heart will be missing.
Yeah. And without that,
without that, we're nothing.
Nothing. Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
that's our magic. That's our magic. Our magic is our stories. Our magic is our ancient lines. Our magic is nature and the sacred. It's all our magic. And you know what? It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah. So final question, Molly. You wrote that this book was born from two voices, reflections of anyone who's ever stood still long enough to feel both the ache and the beauty of being alive. What ache and what beauty were present for you during the writing of this book?
Grace was present. Grace. And the ache is the language of the soul.
And what does grace look like to you?
It's like a warm blanket that I put around myself. A blanket of light, of grace, and to sit in the presence of grace. And we can all sit in the presence of grace if we're quiet long enough. I would say grace. Because I would not let my ego say I wrote the book. I would say I was the rusty old pipe that the book came through. You know, that I was the channel. And then I'd hand it to Graham and I would weep at what came through that man.
What do you most want people to take from this book?
I most want them to come home to themselves in stillness and to spend time in stillness and reflection, and let their lives speak to them through the deep questions, and for them to answer the questions then afterwards. Maybe they can pick up the book randomly and open it and let it speak. And then I would say, get a journal, a blank journal. And then I would say, what's that? How now, how is their essence trying to speak to them?
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. So what's come through clearly for me in this conversation and in Molly's books and across Molly's work is how much of our lives are shaped in the moments we usually rush past. That's at the heart of a mystic in nature. And it's also what Molly's book, What Matters Today, brings right down into everyday life. The question isn't whether we're changing. We are. It's whether we're changing on purpose. And that leads to a simple thought. Every day leaves a trace. Every choice writes a line of the story that you're living. And every moment you pause long enough to hear yourself can change the direction you walk next. So consider this. If you asked yourself each morning, what actually matters today? How different might your life look a year from now? For more information about Molly Harvey's work, including A Mystic in Nature and What Matters Today, and to explore her writing, speaking, and leadership work, you can visit her website at mollyharvey.com. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. Thanks for being with us today. I'll see you next time.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. And the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.